The holographic nameplate glowed softly in the dim light of the council chamber. Earth. The letters hung in the air above an empty chair, just as they had for nearly every session since humanity joined the Galactic Council 3 years ago. Ambassador Krell Van stared at that empty seat and felt his frustration growing. Around him, the other council members continued their debate. The Varix swarm had attacked a mining colony on Talos Prime 12 hours ago. 1,800 miners were trapped underground, while Varix soldiers swept through the surface facilities. We must consider all diplomatic options before taking military action, Ambassador Thelm said from his position at the center table. His species valued careful thought above all else. Perhaps trade sanctions would convince the Varix to withdraw. Trade sanctions take months to have any effect, another ambassador argued. Those miners will be dead long before then. Then we form a military committee to review possible intervention strategies, Thelm replied. But we must follow proper procedures. We cannot simply react without thinking. Krell Van had heard these same arguments 100 times before. The council moved slowly. It valued process and order. Every action required debate, committee review, and formal votes. This kept the peace among dozens of different species with different values and different goals. But it also meant that urgent situations became stuck in endless discussion. The debate continued. Some members wanted to send a diplomatic envoy first. Others suggested waiting to gather more intelligence about Varix intentions. A few argued for immediate military response, but they were quickly shouted down by calls for patience and proper procedure. 4 hours into the session, nothing had been decided. Then the chamber doors burst open. A junior aide rushed in, his face pale with shock. He whispered something to Thelm, who straightened in his seat with visible alarm. "What is it?" Krell Van asked. Thelm's voice was tight with anger. "It seems the situation at Talos Prime has been resolved. Human ships engaged the Varix swarm 40 minutes ago. The battle is over. The miners are being evacuated as we speak." Silence fell across the chamber. Then everyone started talking at once. They had no authority to take military action. "This is a clear violation of council protocols. How dare they intervene without our approval?" Krell Van raised his hand for silence. "Which human ships? Their military fleet?" The aide checked his tablet. "No, Ambassador. A civilian freighter convoy. They were passing through the system when they received the distress signal. The convoy leader redirected course and engaged the Varix forces. By the time our monitoring stations detected the situation, it was already finished." "A civilian convoy defeated a Varix military unit?" someone asked in disbelief. "Apparently the humans had superior weapons and better tactics. The Varix withdrew after losing 3 ships. All 1,800 miners have been safely evacuated to the human vessels." Thelm's face darkened. "This is unacceptable. Draft a formal complaint to Earth immediately. They cannot simply take unilateral action whenever they please." The other ambassadors agreed loudly. Krell Van said nothing. He pulled up his own tablet and began searching through recent reports, while the others vented their anger at Earth's empty seat. The patterns he found troubled him deeply. 6 weeks ago, the Council had been debating whether to evacuate refugees from the Crest Nebula. A stellar collapse was predicted within 3 months, giving plenty of time for careful planning. But human transport ships had arrived within days and evacuated everyone before the Council finished its impact assessment study. 2 months before that, a pirate base in the Outer Spiral had been raiding trade routes for years. The Council's military committee had been developing a response plan for 8 months. Then a human explorer stumbled across the base location and transmitted the coordinates on open channels. Within a week, the pirates were gone, scattered by a dozen different human ships that independently decided to deal with the problem. 4 months ago, disease had broken out on a remote station. The Council's medical board needed to review the situation before authorizing aid. A human doctor working nearby simply showed up with medicine and started treating people. She saved 300 lives before the Council even finished reading her unauthorized medical report. The list went on and on. Disaster relief at New Hope Station, rescue operations in the Frontier Rim, infrastructure repair on damaged colonies. Every time the Council encountered a crisis, Humans were already responding to it before the debates even started. And every time, Earth's seat remained empty as the council drafted complaints that no one on Earth seemed to read. Krellvan closed his tablet and looked around the chamber. The other ambassadors were still arguing about proper procedures and diplomatic protocol. None of them seemed to realize the real problem. He requested to speak, and Thelm granted him permission. "I would like to investigate this matter personally," Krellvan said. "Earth's behavior shows a clear pattern. I believe we need to understand why they act this way before we decide how to respond." "We know why they act this way," Thelm said sharply. "They have no respect for proper authority or established procedures. Perhaps, there is something about their culture we do not understand. Give me 3 months to compile a full report. Then we can make an informed decision about how to handle Earth's membership in this council." The other ambassadors discussed this among themselves. Finally, Thelm nodded. "Very well. You have 3 months, but I warn you, Krellvan. If humans continue to violate council protocols, we may have no choice but to suspend their membership entirely." Krellvan bowed his head in acknowledgement. He gathered his materials and left the chamber, already planning his investigation. As he walked through the corridor, his tablet chimed with an incoming message. It was from Earth. Senator Amy Chen, the human official who handled off-world communications, had sent a brief statement. "We regret any confusion caused by Captain Jake Morrison's actions at Talos Prime. However, we cannot and will not apologize for saving lives. The miners are safe and returning to their families. We hope the Council views this outcome as positive, despite the procedural irregularities." Krellvan read the message twice. There was no real apology there. No promise to follow proper channels in the future. Just a simple statement that humans had saved people and considered that more important than following rules. He pulled up the news feeds from Earth itself. The planet's global networks were celebrating Captain Morrison as a hero. Crowds gathered to welcome him home. Children wore shirts with his picture. The planetary government was giving him medals. No one on Earth seemed to think Morrison had done anything wrong. Krellvan returned to his office and began making arrangements for his trip to Earth. If he was going to understand humanity, he needed to see their homeworld for himself. He needed to talk to these people who kept acting before anyone could stop them. His computer chimed with another alert. New reports were coming in from across the galaxy. A human medical team had just entered a quarantine zone without authorization. A human construction crew was responding to a station emergency 3 sectors away. A human explorer had detected unusual energy readings and was investigating despite warnings to wait for military escort. Krellvan looked at Earth's empty seat on his monitor screen. Somewhere out there, right now, humans were making decisions and taking actions without asking permission from anyone. The pattern was accelerating. Soon every corner of the galaxy would have humans operating independently, helping or interfering depending on one's perspective. The Council needed to understand this species before the situation spiraled completely out of control. Krellvan began drafting his investigation plan, knowing that his report would likely determine whether humanity remained part of the galactic community or became the first species ever expelled from the Council for refusing to follow the rules that kept civilization functioning. The empty seat seemed to mock him from the screen. He wondered if it would ever actually be filled. The transport ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. Krellvan pressed his face against the viewport and stared at the blue and green planet ahead. After 3 weeks of travel and preparation, he was finally here. Earth looked chaotic even from space. Thousands of ships moved in every direction around the planet. Trade vessels, military patrols, civilian transports, exploration craft, and ships whose purpose Krellvan could not identify, all moved in patterns that seemed to have no central control. Other homeworlds had organized traffic lanes and strict flight plans. Earth looked like barely controlled chaos. "First time to the human homeworld?" the transport pilot asked. She was a Trellin, with 4 arms and green-scaled skin. "Yes," Krellvan admitted. "It takes getting used to," she said with what might have been amusement. "Humans do everything fast. They talk fast. Move fast. Make decisions fast. Try not to let it overwhelm you. The pilot was not exaggerating. Within minutes of landing at the primary spaceport, Krell Van felt surrounded by noise and activity. Humans rushed in every direction. Multiple languages echoed through the terminal. News screens showed dozens of different stories simultaneously. Everything moved at a pace that made him dizzy. Senator Amy Chen met him at the arrival gate. She was a small woman with dark hair pulled back in a simple style. Her expression was professional but tired. "Ambassador Krell Van," she said, offering her hand in the human greeting gesture. "Welcome to Earth. I hope your journey was comfortable." Krell Van shook her hand carefully. "Thank you for meeting with me, Senator. I know the Council's complaints must be tiresome to deal with." Amy's mouth quirked in something that might have been a smile. "That's a diplomatic way to put it. Yes. I spend a lot of my time apologizing for my people, saving lives. It gets old." Her honesty surprised him. "You do not think your people should follow Council protocols?" "I think following protocols that let people die while we debate is morally wrong," Amy said bluntly. "But I also understand why the Council exists and why rules matter. It's a difficult balance. Come on, I have a car waiting. We can talk on the way." The car ride through Earth's capital city was an assault on Krell Van's senses. Buildings reached impossibly high into the sky. Crowds of humans filled the streets. Flying vehicles zoomed overhead, and everywhere, screens showed news and information streaming at speeds he could barely follow. "You said you wanted to understand why humans act the way we do," Amy said as the car navigated through traffic. "I thought the best place to start would be our Global Memorial Museum. It might help explain our cultural context." The museum was a massive building near the city center. Amy led him through galleries filled with artifacts and displays from human history. She stopped at a section showing images of something called World War II. "In 1940, our ancestors faced an invasion," Amy explained. "Hundreds of thousands of soldiers were trapped on a beach at a place called Dunkirk. The military said they could only save a fraction of them, but civilian boat owners heard about the crisis. Hundreds of ordinary people took their fishing boats, pleasure craft, and small vessels across a dangerous channel to rescue soldiers. They were not trained for combat. They were not ordered to go. They just went because people needed help." She moved to another display showing natural disasters. When earthquakes hit, neighbors dig through rubble to find survivors. When floods come, strangers form chains to rescue people from the water. When buildings catch fire, people run toward the danger to help, not away from it. Krell Van studied the images carefully. "Other species also help each other in emergencies. Other species also help each other in emergencies. Yes, but they wait for official response teams and proper organization. Humans do not wait. We see someone in danger and we act immediately. Waiting for permission feels wrong to us at a fundamental level." They continued through the museum. Every display showed the same pattern. Humans responding to crisis, without waiting for authority to tell them what to do. It was woven into their history at every level. "I spoke with Captain Morrison before coming here," Krell Van said. "I asked him why he engaged the Varick swarm without contacting the Council first." "What did he say?" "He said there were 1,800 people about to die and he had ships that could help them." He seemed genuinely confused about why this was controversial. When I explained Council protocols, he asked if I expected him to let people die while filling out paperwork. Amy nodded slowly. "That's very human reasoning. We see immediate need. We respond. The consequences and complications come second. But that approach is dangerous," Krell Van said. "What if Morrison had made the situation worse? What if his intervention had started a larger war with the Varricks? What if doing nothing had let 1,800 people die when we could have saved them?" Amy countered. "You are right that our approach has risks. But so does yours. The Council debates for weeks while people suffer. Different risks, different costs." Krell Van had no immediate answer to that. They walked in silence for a while. studying more displays. One section showed medical workers fighting diseases in remote areas. Another showed rescue teams responding to collapsed buildings. Everywhere, the same theme appeared. See a problem? Fix the problem. Deal with complications later. The council seat is empty because we do not function the way other species do. Amy said quietly. You have centralized governments that speak for everyone. Earth has many governments. And even those governments cannot control individual citizens the way other worlds do. Captain Morrison does not report to me. He is a civilian, running his own business. When he chose to help those miners, that was his choice to make. But Earth signed the council membership agreements, Krell protested. Your government promised to follow council protocols. Our government promised to try, Amy corrected. But there are millions of humans scattered across space now. We are explorers, traders, doctors, engineers, and travelers. We all make our own choices. Earth's government cannot force them all to check in before taking action. We are not built that way as a species. Before Krell could respond, Amy's communication device buzzed urgently. She checked it and her face went pale. What is wrong? Another incident, she said tiredly. A human medical team just entered a quarantine zone on Pexar 2 without authorization. They are delivering vaccines for some kind of plague. The council is already sending messages demanding explanations. Krell felt his frustration returning. This is exactly the problem. How can the council work with Earth when your people constantly violate the rules? The people on Pexar 2 are dying at 300 per day, Amy said, reading from her device. The council's medical review board needed 3 more months of data before authorizing intervention. Dr. Lisa Grant ran the numbers and decided she could not accept those deaths. So she went. She broke quarantine protocols. She could spread the disease to other worlds. Or she could save 15,000 lives. Amy looked at him steadily. Which outcome matters more to you, Ambassador? Krell found he did not have a simple answer. I need to speak with this Dr. Grant. She is probably going to be arrested. The Pexar government is cooperating with council authorities. Then I should speak with her quickly, Krell said. Can you arrange transport to Pexar 2? Amy studied him for a long moment. You really want to understand us. I want to make an informed recommendation to the council. If I only listen to complaints and read reports, I will not truly understand why humans act this way. I need to see it myself. All right, Amy said. I will arrange a fast transport. But Ambassador, I should warn you. The more you learn about how humans think, the more complicated this situation is going to become. You might not like the conclusions you reach. The truth is the truth, Krell said. Whether I like it or not. They left the museum and returned to the spaceport. As they walked, Krell noticed news screens showing celebrations for Captain Morrison. He also saw footage of Dr. Grant working on Pexar 2, treating sick people in crowded medical facilities. The humans on Earth were proud of both of them. On the ride to the spaceport, Amy was quiet. Finally, she spoke. The council wants us to change. They want us to wait for permission before helping people. But Ambassador, humans have been acting on immediate conscience for our entire history. It is not a policy we can revise. It is who we are. Krell thought about the empty seat in the council chamber. He was beginning to understand that the seat was not empty because Earth did not care about galactic politics. It was empty because humanity's true presence in the galaxy could not be contained in one representative sitting in one chair. They reached the spaceport, and Amy arranged his passage to Pexar 2. Before he boarded, she gave him one more piece of information. I compiled the data you requested, she said, handing him a data chip. A complete list of human interventions across the galaxy over the past 3 years. Medical relief, disaster response, rescue operations, infrastructure repair, educational programs. There are hundreds of incidents. Most never got reported to the council because they happened so fast or seemed too minor to mention. Krell took the chip carefully. Thank you, Senator. Ambassador. One more thing. These lists, these interviews, They only show you what humans do. If you want to understand why we do it, you need to remember something simple. We cannot watch someone suffer when we have the power to help them. Everything else is secondary to that. The protocols, the procedures, the diplomatic complications, all of that comes second to the immediate moral imperative to reduce suffering. She turned and walked away, leaving Krelvan to board his transport. As the ship lifted off, he looked down at Earth, the chaotic traffic patterns, the crowded cities, the constant motion and activity. It all made more sense now. These were not people who would ever sit still and wait for permission to act. Pexar 2 looked sicker than Krelvan had expected. From orbit, he could see entire cities under medical quarantine. The plague had been spreading for 6 months and showed no signs of stopping. The Council's Medical Review Board was still analyzing transmission patterns and developing intervention protocols. Standard procedure required complete understanding before taking action. But someone had not waited for standard procedure. Krelvan found Dr. Lisa Grant at a temporary medical facility on the edge of the capital city. She was surrounded by sick people lying on cots. Human medical personnel moved between patients, administering injections and checking vital signs. The doctor herself looked exhausted. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hair was pulled back in a messy arrangement. But her hands were steady as she worked. "Dr. Grant?" Krelvan called from the entrance. She looked up briefly. "If you are here to arrest me, you will have to wait. I am in the middle of treatment rounds. I am not here to arrest you. I am Ambassador Krelvan from the Galactic Council. I would like to speak with you about your work here." Lisa finished administering medication to an elderly Pexar before answering. "Fine. You can follow me while I work. I do not have time to sit down for formal interviews." Krelvan followed her through the facility. Lisa moved from patient to patient with quick efficiency. She checked readouts, adjusted medications, and spoke calmly to frightened people in their own language. She seemed to know exactly what each person needed without having to stop and think. "How long have you been monitoring the plague situation on Pexar 2? Krelvan asked. 8 weeks. I was working at a research station 2 systems over when I heard about the outbreak. I started collecting data and running analyses in my spare time." Lisa checked a young child's temperature and made notes on a tablet. The progression patterns were clear. Without intervention, the plague would kill approximately 50,000 people before burning itself out. The Council's Medical Review Board was also analyzing the situation. "Yes, I read their reports. Very thorough, very cautious. They wanted 3 more months of data before making recommendations. Then the recommendations would go to committee for approval. Then resources would need to be allocated. The whole process would take maybe 6 months total. That timeline ensures we fully understand the disease before intervening," Krelvan said. "Premature action could make things worse." Lisa stopped walking and turned to face him. "Ambassador, I am a doctor. I ran the numbers myself. 300 people were dying per day. In 6 months, that is 54,000 deaths. I had vaccines that could stop the plague now. How could I justify waiting when I had the cure in my hands? You violated quarantine protocols. You could have spread the disease to other worlds. My team followed strict contamination procedures. We used proper protective equipment and decontamination protocols. Just because we acted quickly does not mean we acted recklessly." She turned back to her patients. Besides, the risk of spreading the disease was small. The certainty of letting thousands die while waiting for bureaucratic approval was 100%. Krelvan watched her work for several minutes in silence. The facility was full of people who would have been dead in weeks without this intervention. A mother held her young daughter who was already looking healthier after treatment. An elderly man smiled weakly at Lisa as she checked his progress. The evidence of her success surrounded them. "How did you fund this operation?" Krelvan asked. "Personal savings. I spent everything I had on vaccine production and transport. My team volunteered their time. We all knew we would probably be prosecuted for this. You could lose your medical license across all council space." "I know." Lisa administered medication to another patient. "But I will still have saved approximately 15,000 lives. That seems like a fair trade to me. 15,000? The plague death toll was projected at 50,000. Was projected, Lisa emphasized. We have been here for 12 days now. The infection rate has dropped by 70%. The death rate is down to 20 per day, and falling. By the time the plague would have burned out naturally, we will have saved about 15,000 people who would have died waiting for the council to authorize help. She finished with that patient and moved to the next. Krelvan followed, his thoughts churning. Everything Lisa said made logical sense from a purely humanitarian standpoint, but it completely ignored the broader implications of unauthorized action. What if your vaccines had unexpected side effects? He asked. What if your intervention created a more dangerous mutation of the disease? What if the council's caution let 15,000 people die who did not need to? Lisa countered. Ambassador, I understand that the council needs to be careful. I understand that hasty action can cause problems, but there is a cost to overcaution too. Every day spent in committee review is another day of people suffering and dying. At some point, the cost of inaction becomes higher than the risk of action. They moved through another section of the facility. More patients resting peacefully. More people who had been dying just days ago. The local Pexar medical staff worked alongside the human team, learning treatment protocols and administering vaccines themselves. How did the local government respond to your arrival? Krelvan asked. Mixed feelings, Lisa admitted. Officially, they are cooperating with the council's investigation. They have to. But unofficially, the governor thanked me personally. The health minister wants to hire my team permanently, and the people themselves have been overwhelmingly grateful. As if to prove her point, a young Pexar child approached with a drawing. The picture showed a human figure with medical symbols. The child pressed the drawing into Lisa's hands and said something in the local language. Lisa smiled genuinely for the first time since Krelvan arrived. Thank you, sweetie. This is beautiful. The child ran back to her mother, who nodded gratefully at the doctor. Lisa carefully folded the picture and put it in her pocket. That is the 12th drawing I have received, she said quietly. The children here like to draw pictures of people who help them. It reminds me why I became a doctor in the first place. Not to follow protocols or file proper paperwork. To help people who are suffering. Krelvan felt something shift in his understanding. He had been thinking about this situation in terms of rules and procedures, but for Lisa and the other humans, this was about individual people with names and faces. The child who just gave her a drawing, the mother holding her recovering daughter. The elderly man smiling despite his pain. These were not statistics in a council report. They were real lives that had been saved. The council argues that your actions set a dangerous precedent, Krelvan said, though his conviction was wavering. If everyone acts independently without coordination, chaos will result. Maybe. Lisa agreed. Or maybe the council's requirement for perfect coordination before any action is taken creates a different kind of chaos. The chaos of preventable suffering. The chaos of people dying while bureaucrats debate proper procedure. She met his eyes directly. Ambassador, I respect the council's purpose. Truly, I do. The galaxy needs coordination and cooperation. But coordination that values process over outcomes is not wisdom. It is just complicated inaction. Before Krelvan could respond, another human rushed into the facility. Dr. Grant, we have a problem. The Pexar authorities are saying council security is coming to place you under arrest. They will be here within the hour. Lisa nodded calmly. All right. Make sure all current patients complete their treatment protocols. The local medical staff knows how to handle new cases. We have done everything we can here. You are not going to resist arrest? Krelvan asked. Why would I? I knew this was coming when I made the choice to come here. I broke council quarantine protocols. There are consequences for that. She looked around the facility one more time. But I would do it again, every single time. The consequences for me are worth the lives we saved. Krelvan found himself admiring her calm acceptance of her fate. Do you think all humans would make the same choice? Not all. But many would. We are raised with stories of people who broke rules to do the right thing. We celebrate whistleblowers who expose corruption. We honor protesters who challenged unjust laws. We remember doctors who treated patients regardless of whether it was legal or profitable. Individual conscience is valued more highly than obedience to authority in human culture. 1. She walked with him toward the exit. Outside, crowds of Pexar citizens had gathered. When they saw Lisa, they began clapping and calling out words in their own language. The human medical team translated, "Thank you, you saved us, we will remember you." Lisa waved to them but kept walking. "This is the part the council does not see from their chamber," she said. "The gratitude of people who would be dead without help, the children who get to grow up because someone acted fast enough to save them, the families that stayed together because someone cared more about lives than procedures." Krelvan looked at the grateful crowd. Then he pulled out his communication device and sent a message to his ship. "I need to examine more data before I return to the council." "Can you transmit the files?" Senator Chen provided. "Already done, Ambassador," his assistant replied. Krelvan spent the next hour reviewing the comprehensive list of human interventions Amy had compiled. Medical relief operations on 17 different worlds. Disaster response in 32 systems. Rescue operations. Infrastructure repair. Educational programs. Agricultural aid. Technical support. Hundreds of incidents, over 3 years. All done without council approval. All done because individual humans saw problems and decided to help. He cross-referenced the interventions with outcome data. The survival rates, recovery statistics, and long-term impact measurements told a clear story. Human interventions were generally successful. They saved lives, reduced suffering, and solved problems. Yes, there were some complications and diplomatic tensions, but the net positive impact was undeniable. When council security arrived to arrest Lisa, Krelvan watched her go calmly. She did not argue or protest. She just walked away with security officers while the Pexar citizens called out their thanks. One of the human medical team members approached Krelvan. "Are you going to condemn her to the council?" "God, I am going to tell the truth," Krelvan said. "Whatever that truth turns out to be." He returned to his ship with more questions than answers. Lisa was right that her actions saved lives, but Thelm was also right that uncoordinated action could cause larger problems. Both perspectives had merit. Both concerns were valid. The real question was, which mattered more? The order and stability the council provided, or the immediate relief humans offered to people in crisis? Krelvan did not yet know the answer. But he was beginning to understand that Earth's empty seat might represent not a failure of diplomacy, but a fundamentally different approach to being part of the galactic community. The emergency alert reached the Galactic Council at 0600 hours station time. A civilian transport carrying 3,000 passengers had suffered catastrophic engine failure near the frontier rim. Life support was failing. The ship would break apart within 20 hours. Krelvan sat in the council chamber and watched his colleagues spring into coordinated action. This was what the council did well. Within minutes, they had mobilized the nearest rescue fleet, coordinated resources, and established a command structure. Everything moved with practiced efficiency. Nearest council rescue vessels are 16 hours away, the operations coordinator reported. They will reach the transport with 4 hours to spare. More than enough time for proper evacuation procedures. Ambassador Thelm nodded approvingly. Excellent response time. Continue monitoring and keep all vessels updated on the situation. Krelvan checked his own displays. 16 hours. It was fast for a coordinated response. The council had done well, but a small part of his mind wondered if any humans were nearby. He did not have to wonder long. "We have unauthorized ships approaching the transport," the coordinator announced 10 minutes later. 6 vessels. Identification tags show them as human construction workers from a nearby station project. The chamber erupted in familiar outrage. Krelvan found himself unsurprised. Of course, humans were already responding. Contact those ships immediately, Thelm ordered. Tell them to stand down. Council rescue forces are handling this situation. They are not responding to hails. The coordinator said. Wait. Receiving a short message now. It says, busy. Talk later. Thelm's face darkened with anger. This is completely unacceptable. Put video feeds from the transport on screen, Krelvan said quietly. I want to see what the humans are doing. The main display switched to show multiple camera angles. The damaged transport hung in space, atmosphere venting from several hull breaches. Approaching it were 3 cargo haulers, 2 shuttles, and what appeared to be a mining vessel. None of them were designed for rescue operations. A human voice came over the open channel. This is Kyle Bennett, with the construction crew. Transport ship, we are here to get you out. Hold tight. Inside the transport, panicked passengers crowded against viewports. The ship shuddered as another system failed. Children cried. Adults tried to remain calm and failed. They were losing hope. Then the first human ship pulled alongside and the crew went to work. Krelvan watched in fascination as the humans improvised solutions in real time. The cargo haulers had no proper docking systems, so they used magnetic grapples to lock onto the transport hull. When docking ports would not align correctly, human workers in spacesuits manually cut new entry points. The mining vessel deployed drilling equipment repurposed as rescue tools. This is madness, Thelm said. They have no training for this. They are going to get people killed. But the humans kept working. Kyle Bennett coordinated the operation with calm efficiency, directing his crew through each challenge. When a passenger evacuation route became blocked by structural damage, a woman named Kate Rivers volunteered to enter the failing transport alone, to guide people out through alternate paths. She is going into a ship that could break apart at any moment, an ambassador said in horror. Why would she take that risk? Krelvan thought of Dr. Lisa Grant walking calmly toward arrest. Because someone needs to. And she can. Kate entered the transport through a jury-rigged airlock. Her helmet camera showed cramped corridors filled with frightened passengers. She spoke to them calmly, organizing them into groups and leading them toward the evacuation points. When a young child became too scared to move, Kate picked her up and carried her. The evacuation proceeded faster than proper procedures would have allowed, but slower than needed. Structural sensors showed the transport was deteriorating rapidly. Kyle ran calculations and came to a grim conclusion. We cannot get everyone out in time using current methods, he announced over the open channel. We need to buy more time. How? Kate asked from inside the dying ship. We bring the auxiliary engines online and give this ship enough thrust to reach the Council rescue fleet faster. We meet them halfway. Silence fell across the Council chamber. Every ambassador knew that activating damaged engines was incredibly dangerous. The Council's emergency procedures explicitly forbade it. That is suicide, Thelm said. Those engines could detonate and kill everyone. The operations coordinator pulled up technical data. The risk of engine detonation is estimated at 47%. The risk of the transport breaking apart before evacuation completes is 98%. The human calculation is correct, but only in the sense that certain death is worse than probable death. Contact them, Thelm ordered. Tell them not to attempt this. That is a direct order from the Galactic Council. The coordinator tried. Kyle's response was brief. Council rescue ships are still 12 hours away. This transport has maybe 2 hours left. We are restarting the engines. If you want to help, clear a flight path for us. Krelvan leaned forward in his seat. Around him, other ambassadors watched in tense silence. This was the moment that would prove either human recklessness or human ingenuity. Inside the transport, Kate continued evacuating passengers even as she coordinated with Kyle on the engine restart sequence. How many people still need to evacuate? She asked. Approximately 800, Kyle replied. We can get maybe half of them out before the engines come online. The rest will have to stay aboard and hope the ship holds together. Then we better make sure it holds together, Kate said calmly. The human crew worked with desperate speed. Passengers streamed through improvised airlocks into the waiting ships. Parents clutched children. Elderly passengers were carried by stronger volunteers. The human workers moved constantly, never stopping, never slowing down. Krelvan found himself gripping his chair armrests. He had spent weeks investigating human behavior from a distance. Now he was watching it happen in real time. With thousands of lives hanging in the balance, the auxiliary engines flickered to life. The transport shuddered violently. Warning alarms screamed across every system. For a terrible moment, Krelvan thought the whole ship would explode, but it held. The engines provided weak but steady thrust. The transport began moving toward the approaching Council rescue fleet. "Keep evacuating," Kyle ordered. "Every person we can transfer now is one less person at risk if this goes bad." The evacuation continued. More passengers poured into the human ships. The cargo haulers filled far beyond their normal capacity. The shuttles took on twice their recommended passenger load. The mining vessel opened its ore storage bays and packed people inside. Kate remained on the transport, making sure everyone who could evacuate did so. "We have 500 people still aboard," she reported. "We are out of time for further evacuation. I am sealing the remaining passengers in the central hull section. It is the most structurally sound area." "Kate, get out of there," Kyle said. "You have done enough." "There are 500 people still on this ship," Kate replied. "Someone needs to stay with them. Someone needs to make sure they stay calm and organized. That someone is me." Krelvan watched this human woman choose to stay aboard a dying ship with strangers rather than save herself. The council chamber was completely silent. Even Thelm said nothing. The transport shook harder. More systems failed. The structural integrity dropped to dangerous levels. But the engines kept running, pushing the ship forward through space. "Council rescue fleet is now visible on long-range sensors," the operations coordinator reported. "Estimated contact in 18 minutes. Kyle's voice came over the channel. "We can make it. Everyone hold on. We are almost there." The minutes crawled past. Krelvan could not look away from the displays. The transport was falling apart piece by piece. Metal groaned, hull plates cracked, but the human ships stayed close, ready to grab any survivors if the worst happened. Inside the central hull section, Kate kept the remaining passengers calm. She told them stories about Earth. She described mountains and oceans. She talked about her family. She kept 500 frightened people from panicking during the longest 18 minutes of their lives. Finally, the Council rescue fleet arrived. Professional rescue ships with proper equipment and trained crews. They surrounded the damaged transport and began careful evacuation procedures. Kyle coordinated with them smoothly. "We have 2,500 passengers distributed across our 6 ships, all alive and relatively healthy. The transport still has 500 people in the central hull section. Your ships should extract them first. That transport is not going to last much longer." The Council ships moved with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, they established proper docking connections and began extracting the remaining passengers. Kate was the last person to leave the transport, staying until every other passenger was safely away. 10 minutes after she evacuated, the transport's engines finally failed. The ship broke apart in a shower of debris, tumbling through space as a complete loss. But all 3,000 passengers were alive. In the council chamber, no one spoke for a long moment. Then Ambassador Thelm found his voice. "They succeeded. But they took terrible risks. If those engines had detonated, everyone would have died. If they had waited for proper rescue procedures, everyone would have died anyway," Krelvan said quietly. "The humans did the math and chose the option with any chance of success over the option with no chance. Luck saved them, not skill." "Luck, skill, improvisation, and courage," Krelvan corrected. "They had no training for this situation, but they had the willingness to try anyway. And 3,000 people are alive because of it." He stood up and left the chamber, knowing he had seen something the other ambassadors were not ready to accept. The humans had violated every proper procedure. They had taken unreasonable risks, they had ignored direct orders from the council, and they had saved everyone. Krelvan returned to his quarters and began writing his report. He still had one more stop to make before presenting his findings. He needed to visit the place where humanity first made contact with the galactic community. He needed to understand the original disconnect that had led to 3 years of empty seats and unauthorized actions. But after watching Kate Rivers choose to stay aboard a dying ship with strangers, after seeing Kyle Bennett risk his entire crew to save people he had never met, Krelvan knew what his conclusion would be. Humanity would never fit into the Council the way other species did. The question was whether the Council could adapt to humanity instead. The space station hung at the edge of explored territory, a diplomatic outpost marking the boundary between Council space and the unknown. 3 years ago, this was where humanity first encountered the galactic community. Krelvan arrived here seeking the final piece of understanding he needed. Station Commander Ellen Foster met him at the docking bay. She was an older woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her uniform bore the insignia of multiple space agencies, suggesting a long career across different organizations. "Ambassador Krelvan," she said, shaking his hand firmly. "I was wondering when someone from the council would come asking questions. Took you long enough. You knew someone would investigate eventually? Of course. Humans have been causing headaches for the council since day one. I am surprised you waited 3 years to figure out why." She gestured toward the station interior. "Come on. I will show you where it all started." They walked through corridors that showed signs of age and heavy use. This was not a glamorous diplomatic station but a working outpost that had seen better days. Ellen led him to an observation deck with a clear view of the surrounding space. "First contact happened right out there," she said, pointing toward empty space. "A routine human patrol encountered a council exploration vessel. Both sides were startled. Both sides were cautious. But we managed to establish basic communication within a few hours. The council records say first contact went smoothly. It did. Your people were polite and curious. Our people were excited to learn we were not alone in the galaxy. Everyone was on their best behavior." Ellen sat down in a worn chair. The problems came later, during the membership negotiations. Krelvan sat across from her. "Earth signed the membership agreements. Your government accepted all the standard protocols." "They did," Ellen agreed. "And they meant it honestly. But there was a fundamental misunderstanding that no one caught at the time." "What misunderstanding?" Ellen leaned back and considered her words carefully. "Other species that join the council have centralized governments that speak for their entire population. When the Trellan government signs an agreement, every Trellan follows it. When the Varix leadership makes a commitment, every Varix warrior obeys. Your council is built on the assumption that governments control their citizens. That is how civilization functions." "That is how your civilizations function," Ellen corrected. "Earth is different. We have hundreds of separate governments. And even those governments cannot force individual citizens to obey in the way other species do. When Earth's representatives signed the council agreements, they were speaking for Earth's official government. They were not speaking for millions of independent humans already scattered across space." Krelvan felt a cold understanding settle over him. "You mean the agreements were never enforceable?" "Not in any practical sense. Captain Morrison does not report to Earth's government. He is a civilian running his own business. Dr. Grant is an independent medical professional. Kyle Bennett works for a private construction company. None of them are soldiers or government agents. They all make their own choices about when and how to act. But surely Earth could have explained this limitation to the Council." Ellen laughed without humor. "They tried. During the early negotiations, Earth's representatives repeatedly emphasized that human society is decentralized and individualistic. But I do not think the Council truly understood what that meant. To species with unified command structures, our explanations probably sounded like polite disclaimers rather than fundamental warnings about how humans operate." She stood and walked to the window. "The council seat is empty because filling it would be a lie. No single human can speak for all humanity. No government on Earth can promise that every human in space will follow Council protocols. We are not built that way as a species. Krelvan thought about everything he had witnessed. Captain Morrison responding to a distress call without checking for authorization. Dr. Grant delivering vaccines because she could not accept preventable deaths. Kate Rivers staying aboard a dying ship with strangers. None of them had asked permission. None of them had waited for official approval. Why do humans act this way? He asked. Other species also value individual life, but they understand the need for coordination and authority. Because we evolved differently, Ellen said simply. Most spacefaring species evolved from social insects or pack animals with strict hierarchies. Humans evolved as cooperative hunters who made individual decisions and then worked together by choice. We do not have instinctive obedience to authority. We have instinctive response to immediate need. She turned back to face him. When a human sees someone in danger, something fundamental in our brain screams at us to help. Waiting for permission from distant authorities feels morally wrong at a gut level. We know intellectually that coordination and protocols matter. But when faced with immediate suffering we can relieve, most humans will act first and deal with consequences later. Krelvan stood and joined her at the window. In the distance, he could see ships moving through space. Some were council vessels following approved flight plans. Others were human ships going wherever they chose, following paths determined by individual captains, making individual decisions. The council believes humanity is reckless and dangerous. We are, Ellen admitted. We take risks other species would not take. We act without full information. We improvise when we should plan. All of that is true, but we also save people who would die waiting for proper authorization. We solve problems that would remain unsolved during lengthy committee reviews. We act when others only debate. You make it sound like a virtue. It is both a virtue and a flaw, depending on the situation. Sometimes, our quick action prevents tragedy. Sometimes it causes complications. But Ambassador, here is what the Council needs to understand. You cannot change this about humanity. It is not a policy we chose. It is not a cultural phase we will outgrow. This is who we are at a fundamental level. Krelvan thought about his report, due to the Council in 2 days. He had all the information he needed now. The question was, what recommendation to make? If humanity cannot follow Council protocols, perhaps Earth should not be a Council member, he said, testing the idea. Perhaps not, Ellen agreed calmly. But kicking us out will not stop humans from being present across the galaxy. It will just mean you have no formal relationship with us at all, no communication channel, no diplomatic ties, no way to coordinate when our activities intersect with Council interests. Is that better than accepting that Earth will always be an unusual member who operates differently? She had a point. Expelling Earth would not make humans disappear. It would just make an already complicated situation even more chaotic. What do you think the Council should do? Krelvan asked. Adapt, Ellen said simply. Create new frameworks that acknowledge how humans actually operate, instead of trying to force us into models designed for species with completely different social structures. Establish rapid response protocols that work on human timescales instead of Council timescales. Accept that Earth's seat will often be empty, because humanity's real presence in the galaxy is measured in millions of individuals making independent choices. Krelvan returned to his ship and spent 2 days writing his report. He included everything he had learned. The historical context of human behavior, the pattern of unauthorized but successful interventions, the fundamental biological and cultural differences that made humans operate differently from other species. He concluded with a recommendation that he knew would be controversial. Do not expel Earth. Instead, create a new category of Council membership that acknowledged humanity's unique nature. Maintain diplomatic relations while accepting that humans would continue acting independently. Establish better communication channels so human actions could be coordinated with Council activities when possible, even if not always approved in advance. When he presented his report to the full Council, the reaction was predictably mixed. Some ambassadors argued for immediate expulsion, Others wanted stricter sanctions. But a few, particularly those whose worlds had benefited from human interventions, argued for accepting Krelvan's proposal. Ambassador Thelm was the most vocal opponent. If we make exceptions for humanity, every other species will demand special treatment. The Council's authority will collapse. The Council's authority is based on willing cooperation, Krelvan replied. Species join because they see value in coordination and mutual benefit. If our protocols become so rigid that we reject an entire species for operating differently, what does that say about our flexibility and wisdom? The debate continued for hours. Finally, they voted. The proposal passed by the narrowest possible margin. Earth would remain a council member, but under a new framework that acknowledged their unique nature. The empty seat would remain empty, recognized now as a symbol of humanity's different approach, rather than a failure of diplomacy. Krelvan sent the news to Senator Amy Chen on Earth. Her response was characteristically brief. Thank you for trying to understand us. We will do our best to work within this new framework while remaining true to who we are. 2 days later, Krelvan sat in the council chamber during a routine session. Earth's seat was empty as usual. But now, when he looked at it, he understood what it represented. Somewhere in the galaxy right now, a human ship was diverting course to investigate strange signals. A human doctor was responding to a medical emergency without waiting for authorization. A human engineer was stopping to help repair a damaged station they happened to pass. Millions of individual humans were scattered across space, each making their own choices, each acting according to their own conscience. The seat was empty because humanity had never needed to sit and wait. They were already out there, already engaged, already acting. The empty chair was not a symbol of absence, but of a different kind of presence. A presence that could not be contained in one representative or controlled by one government. A junior aide approached Krelvan with a tablet. Ambassador, we are receiving reports of another incident. A human exploration team discovered a damaged colony ship in an uncharted system. They are conducting rescue operations now. Should we file a formal complaint? Krelvan looked at the empty seat, then back at the aide. No. Just monitor the situation and offer assistance if requested. The humans will handle it. The aide looked surprised but nodded and walked away. Krelvan returned his attention to the council proceedings. They were debating resource allocation for a development project. The discussion would likely take weeks to resolve. Meanwhile, somewhere in that uncharted system, humans were already pulling survivors from a damaged ship. They would have everyone safe long before the council even acknowledged the crisis existed. Krelvan found himself almost smiling. 3 months ago, that thought would have frustrated him. Now he understood it was just the reality of having humans as part of the galactic community. They would never wait for permission. They would never sit still while people needed help. They would continue acting on their own initiative, driven by an instinct older than civilization itself. The empty seat remained empty, and perhaps, Krelvan thought, that was exactly where it should be. Because humanity's real seat was not in a council chamber. It was out there in the stars. In the actions of millions of individuals who saw problems and chose to act, who encountered suffering and chose to help, who found people in danger and could not walk away. Earth's seat would always be empty. Because humanity was always somewhere else, already doing what needed to be done before anyone could tell them to stop or wait or think more carefully about the consequences. And after 3 months of investigation, Krelvan had finally made peace with that reality. The council would adapt or it would struggle. But either way, humans would continue being exactly what they had always been. People who acted first and apologized later, if they apologized at all. He glanced at the empty seat one more time. Then he turned his attention back to the endless debate happening around him. Content now to let humanity be humanity, while the council did what it did best. Talk, plan, and carefully consider every angle of every decision. Both approaches had their place in the galaxy. The council's careful deliberation prevented rash mistakes. Humanity's immediate action prevented unnecessary suffering. Together, perhaps they could create something better than either approach alone. The empty seat glowed softly in the chamber light, a permanent reminder that some species simply could not be contained in a single chair or controlled by a single set of rules. And somewhere out there, another human was already proving that point again.